I think we did a good job. I at least liked what we did last time.
Rage was kind of fantastic. Probably like the best we've done.
Oh.
And I think you were sort of the glue behind that.
It's just I default to more of a meta sort of like, well, what did we take from this? And that was just poignant because it was a school shooting thing, and it's like, anyway. But and this book lends itself to that well too, considering it's apocalyptic in a COVID-19 sort of way.
Yeah, exactly. I saw a funny statistic, or not a statistic, but like a little thing.
Are we recording now?
It's recording now.
Oh, okay.
I saw a thing that Stephen King made a statement that every time there's some sort of pandemic, there's SARS, bird flu, swine flu, all this stuff, every time something like that happened, his sales spike of The Stand.
Oh.
Everybody goes out and buys The Stand.
It's not just because they're really great pictures.
Really what?
Great pictures.
Pictures?
Yeah, but I like to say pictures. Do you ever hear that? Do you ever hear that George W. Bush quote?
I don't think so.
He's talking to a bunch of kids in an elementary school, and he's supposed to be reading to them, and he's like, the great thing about books is sometimes there's really great pictures.
That's the good thing about a book.
Great thing about books.
I love how in his mind, he's trying to relate to the kids, but to everyone else, it's like, that makes you look like an idiot, George.
Yeah. Well, it's the way he says it, but I mean, like a lot of things he says, we're just, I've got to give you another one.
Yeah, throw it. See, this is what I was talking about. This is what makes the videos fun for me. Anybody watching is like, who are these guys?
I thought this was like a cold open.
Yeah.
Are we doing cold opens?
We're doing a cold open.
Okay. Paula Poundstone would be proud. Now, George Bush also said, if you're a single mother in America, which is the hardest job in the world as far as I'm concerned, and you're working hard to put food on your family. The Stand.
Oh, man.
When food is scarce, how can you put it on your family? What about your family? These are the big questions that are answered in The Stand.
We just started, and I'm losing it, man. Oh, man.
I mean, well, but kind of. I mean, there's some truth to that. I mean, rarely is the question asked, is our children learning? And that's the point of The Stand. What did we learn from Stephen King's iconic novel, The Stand, that helped us, or maybe we didn't learn the lessons we should have, in navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, which we are still in. I still see people wearing masks. Some of them, when they're driving alone in their Prius, they're still masked up. I don't remember any comment about masks in The Stand.
No.
Except for, and maybe I'm jumping ahead here. I hope you don't have to cut and splice
This
too
is
much.
a spoiler-filled discussion, so feel free to say anything you want.
Spoiler
they all die at
filled.
the end.
Or do they? I think there was a question mark as to that.
Yeah.
Like there was like a little tinge of hope. But
so what was
the masks? The only time I remember people wearing masks is after the government has realized there's a big issue. There's been this outbreak of some sort of flu-like disease.
They call it the super flu.
The super flu.
Or Captain Trips, they nicknamed it in the book.
Which
I never understood why.
Yeah, and
did it ever explain where that nickname came from? Captain Trips?
I don't recall it.
Me neither.
But every time I read that, I assumed it referred to diarrhea.
Oh, really? I thought maybe it just made you stumble and trip.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of the thought I had. But
or like eventually you just conked. So Captain Trips, you're just out. Stephen, buddy, if you would mind informing us on that. I know you don't like to explain your novels. As
like he's going to be one of the 4 people that watch this video.
I'm like, that's my hope here. And if any of our friends, family, loose acquaintances, cold contacts, warm contacts know Stephen King's contacts, please.
If you know Stephen King, point him in our direction. He'll be impressed with our content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a mask at the government facility. It was a military facility where they were trying
Underground in California, right? You're talking about that one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they get one of the, early on in the book, one of the characters who first comes into contact with Captain Trips, but doesn't trip himself, even though his friends do, they want to basically do experiments on this guy to find out why. Why Stuart Redman.
Stuart Redman is naturally immune, so he gets quarantined in a CDC building in Vermont. Or do they take him to Atlanta first?
I don't know that fact.
I think they take him to Vermont. Sorry.
In my mind's eye, he didn't travel that far, but perhaps
he did because he's from Texas. See, this is why we should have had the map. And I could point you, I could say Texas to Vermont.
Okay, superimpose map here.
I'm not gonna superimpose.
It's a map. It's
maybe
a map.
I will. Sorry, another tangent.
Yeah.
That was one thing. In one of the last videos I did with Jordan, he mentioned how in The Shining, how Dick Halloran is in Florida, and he sends a mental message, or crap, what was it? Was it Danny? Sends a mental message from Colorado and he talks about how like people in Maine probably heard it because it's just like right in between. And I at the moment I didn't really like think about it too much. And I looked at a map later, I'm like, it's like this way.
I
was like, you are so far off, because he was talking about trying to connect it to Stephen King's other books.
Yeah,
and he's like, yeah, maybe one of his later books there will be a scene in Maine, because all his books are in Maine, and it'll be a character that like hears the mental message or whatever. And I'm like, that is nowhere near Florida, man. Okay,
they take Stu because of his natural immunity. Yeah. They take him to this facility to test him, to figure out why he's immune. And by the way, other spoiler alert, this whole disease leaked from a lab. And we can get back to that part, but the only time I remember a mask, and it took us 8 minutes to get to this point, was when they were trying to prod and poke him with things, and they weren't telling him why, and they were masked.
In like hazmat suits.
Yes,
that's right.
They were hazmated, and he was like one of the most badass parts of the book, where he's like, "You will die if you touch me. Like, I'm not giving you anything."
He's sick of it.
Yeah, he's sick of it. They won't give him answers. He asks questions. He doesn't know.
He's basically kidnapped.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't know anything. They quarantine his whole town. He's from a small town in Texas. And they shut the whole town down, and they take anybody who's been exposed, and they like extradite them. Is that the word? Extradite them to CDC headquarters in Vermont. All of his friends die, but he doesn't even know it. He's like the only survivor, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, but he doesn't know anything. He just knows they showed up and took him, and it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy, and it doesn't seem unrealistic, frankly. I hope this video doesn't get censored by me saying that.
I think it might.
If
this were a year ago, it would.
We should actually have a code word for COVID, so that we don't have the little blue pop-up on the bottom that's like, COVID misinformation. Visit the CDC, because if you visit the CDC, they will abduct you. And they'll wonder why you were immune.
That's misinformation.
Okay, that part will be, I hope you can put like a blue box.
Censor this man.
Okay, but back to the point. Stuart Redman becomes this iconic character in the book. And this is a thick book. Like, this book really tries to navigate the entire United States, like, as a story setting. It's So anyway, that's where I saw masks. And apparently where we started this.
Now that I'm thinking about it again, I think there was a scene, one of my favorite scenes, which is a little messed up. I'm learning more and more that I'm a little messed up. Things that I would never engage in or be interested in my real life, I love reading about them. There's a scene where there's like this very racially charged group of black people, and they're like executing all the white people they can get a hold of. Do you remember that part?
Faintly.
It's like when society's really collapsing, and there's a dude, and he has a bandana over his face.
Right. Yeah.
That's the only other mask I can. And they're just like shooting people in the street. It's really nuts.
But that wasn't to protect from the disease.
No, it was just like, it's our turn to rule now.
Yeah.
And like he's just executing people, and I'm like, this is intense, and I kind of loved it.
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder, if people had worn masks, maybe things wouldn't have gotten out of hand so far. But they did. And going back to like the beginning a little bit.
We should back up so far.
Well,
I'm your host, Ty, and this is...
I'm Mo.
Mo Haas, Wizard of Laws.
At
your
service.
Is it okay for me to say that, or is that only you can say that?
No, it's cool when other people say it. I actually like it better.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the great Stephen King Read-a-thon, and welcome. We're going to talk about The Stand after 11 minutes of filming. We're going to introduce the book.
And then we're going to have the same conversation in 3 other languages that we know. So it's going to be a lot of filming today.
We should mention, and obviously we're very lighthearted. We're having fun with it. Mo and I go way back. If you don't know who Mo is, you should go watch the video that we did on Rage, because it's pretty good. I'm happy with that one. Like I was telling him before we started filming, I think, do people say filming anymore? Recording. I don't know.
Go back and watch Rage. And by the way, I'm going to comment here. Sadly,
that's what I was getting to. Okay. That's what I was going to say. You should say it.
No, you say it.
You're more tactful.
No, I'm not more tactful. I just wanted to give a plug to our dear friend who we lost after recording that video, Jordan, who is still very much in our hearts and on our minds, and we miss him dearly. So I had anticipated when we started down the track of reading The Stand that we would have the same sort of dialogue with,
that would be all 3 of us
with Jordan in our 3 respective hometowns, and so it's bittersweet it's not sweet, it's bitter to not
sweet
happen.
To see you. I'm glad I got to come and visit,
and to be together in the same room because you traveled for the holidays. You managed the holiday madness.
We had a nightmare in the airport, in 4 different airports on our way here, but we got here. It's nice to see my family, nice to see Idaho in the winter, even though it's very much colder than what I'm used to in Texas. But I put my jacket on.
It's cold outside.
My wife is, dude, she's like under a pile of blankets all day.
Yeah, there's no snow on the ground right now, but she's afraid to drive because of the snow.
Just but it's
really a potentiality of snow, and that's fair. That's a fair fear.
So yeah, we really do. I think about Jordan every day, man. I miss him a lot. And this, I said in the other videos, I think that the whole Stephen King read-a-thon thing that we started doing, it was bittersweet because it kind of helped me reconnect with him. I hadn't really talked to him all that much for a while, you know. It's not like we ever had a falling out or anything, but doing the Stephen King videos, we just had separate lives. We actually started talking a lot more and stuff. So that's why I kind of wanted to keep it going. That's why I'm here with Mo. But also, I should mention this because I talked about this in my last Stephen King video, which was a collection of short stories called Night Shift. If there's anyone out there who's interested in Stephen King, Mo gets first pick on any books that he wants to read and discuss here on the channel. But, like I said, I want to keep it going, but it's a lot of effort to try to do a video for every book, and I want to be able to actually finish it, like, in my lifetime. And so I think I've struck a good balance. If there's anybody out there who wants to read a Stephen King book and discuss it with us, put it in the comments. There's an email in the description that I'll put there. I think it's EmoSongsAndReadalongs at gmail.com. That's the channel name. Did you know that's the channel? EmoSongsAndReadalongs. Email me, be like, hey, I like this Stephen King book, and we'll do a Zoom call, and you can be on the channel. So that'll be fun. And I highly recommend it. It's very well paying. I was able to quit my job as an attorney, and this is what I do now. Luke has really taken care. Ty, sorry. You called me by my real name. Well, you're going to cut that part out anyway. I don't want people knowing I'm a lawyer. Wizard of Laws could be. I'm a lobbyist. A lobbyist. I've had, not an epiphany, that's not the right word, but a sort of an awakening. I have avoided using my real name on the channel. Like, Rory one time left a comment, and I contacted him. I was like, can you take my name out of that comment? Like, just call me Ty. But now I'm, like, waking up to the fact, like, that's dumb. Like, who cares if my name is Luke or Ty? I go by Ty because my last name is Tyshirt. This is invigorating. I'm getting it off my chest. I'm revealing myself to the public. Next week we'll record The Stand. Yeah. So anyway, that's stupid. I think so. We introduced the series with the book. We talked about Jordan. I didn't want to proceed without at least mentioning him, right? And we invited viewers to come and join the channel, be on the channel. And so let's introduce the book. And what is it about? If you had to boil it down into a few sentences, what would you say? I'll answer that, but I was going to say, like, maybe we could spur some viewership by doing more cold opens. Okay. I think that's a really good... I've done a couple of those with Jordan, and they're fun. Yeah, but also, like, we should give away something for comments, and I'm prepared to be the gift giver.
I don't know what it would be yet.
For every comment, you will get a nice cold glass of grapefruit sparkling. What is this? What did you say? Grapefruit something?
It's a grapefruit gin and tonic type thing.
There you go. He'll send it to you in the mail. Unsealed, just like that. You'll just get a wet box with a broken glass inside.
Yeah. I don't think that's happening.
Okay. Were you being
if
serious?
I were to, oh yeah, no, I think it'd be kind of fun.
Like a gift for comments? What do you mean?
Yeah, that's what people do. That's how they get interaction with their videos on YouTube. It's like, all right, click the like button, leave a comment below, and we'll pick one randomly and give you $50,000. I know that's peanuts, but we'll just when we're making as much as we are from Aflac, we can share.
I have seen that sort of stuff, and that reminds me actually. A lot of channels use Patreon and stuff like that. I wanted to start doing a Patreon. Resigned from being a teacher. You knew that, right? I mean, I put it on there on a bunch of my videos. Like, I figured why not? If somebody wants to throw me $5, it's like, I won't turn it away. No one's donated yet.
The first person who donates $50 will receive a gift of $20.
So anyway, long story short, in the description, there's a PayPal and a Venmo, and I normally wouldn't bring it up in the video, but I did want to mention, if anybody out there would like to send money to Jordan's family, feel free to send it through there and just put a comment, and I will forward 100% of your donation to either his widow, his kids, his parents, whoever you want it to go to. I'll make sure it gets there.
Okay, you asked me a question. You said The Stand.
Because I've noticed,
after
reading 11 or 12 Stephen King books, I've noticed a lot of his books can be summed up in 1 or 2 sentences. He just gets a cool idea and he just jumps in. He throws interesting characters in a situation and he goes. The Stand is somewhat like that, although there is more to it. It's hard to sum it up in 1 or 2, but you could sum it up in a paragraph pretty easily, I think.
Okay.
So what would you say?
I'm going to let you take the first stab at this because I'm new to the channel.
Okay.
And we didn't do this with Rage, so...
True. With Rage, it's kid brings gun to school. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Maybe kid with messed up family life brings gun to school? Something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
For The Stand, it's basically a no, I can't do it. A government-created or funded, military-created super virus kills 99.7% of the United States. And it kills other countries as well, but the whole story is set in the U.S. And then that's kind of like the first half of the book. And then after a huge swath of the population is wiped out, then the survivors start to regather and try to and there's sort of a group of the quote-unquote good guys and a group of the quote-unquote bad guys, and they clash, and that's basically the whole story. Would you say? What do you think?
Okay, I'm going to try one too.
Yes.
The Stand. Science experiment turns social experiment. Who will survive, if anyone? And if they survive, how did they do it?
I laugh way too much in these videos. Sometimes when I go back and edit it, I'm like, you just look like an idiot just laughing at everything. But I just love talking with you.
Yeah, I love talking with you
funny
too.
Guy. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a good synopsis.
I want to talk about Frannie.
Yes, so I was thinking we could dive into characters.
Okay, can't talk about it.
What? No, yes. No. So we laid out the premise, but now we're going to spoil all of it by talking about what happens to specific characters, because that's really where the book shines. There's lots, or stands.
Yeah.
There's lots and lots of characters, and there's lots of character development and growth. So you want to talk about Frannie?
Well, so we talked about Stuart Redman. Stuart Redman eventually falls in love. And when you hear Stuart's backstory, you're surprised that he falls in love at all, let alone with the woman he falls in love with. There are a couple problems with this love, though. One being that Frannie is pregnant, and he doesn't know it.
Not Stuart's kid.
Not Stuart's kid.
The dead guy's kid.
A dead guy in Maine. It's his kid. And she's keeping that like a secret because at this point, this becomes an important thing in the book. People don't know whether newborns are going to be susceptible to the disease,
the virus,
or if they are going to be immune, or if they have parents who have a natural immunity, whether that will carry through.
Right.
So she's preggo, and when they meet, and the other sticky thing is she's got this little man boy that wants to, be with her, who has brought her from Maine to some distance, protected her to a degree.
They knew each other since before the virus, and I don't like using this word, but do you know the term incel?
I've heard that word.
Involuntarily celibate. He's like the quintessential incel.
Okay.
He's fat and gross, and he wants to be an author, and he's just he thinks he's very artistic, and he thinks he's better than everybody else, but really everybody hates him.
What's his name?
Harold. Lauder?
Harold Lauder, yeah.
He's Franny's friend's little brother, and he's always had a crush on Frannie, and she finds him repulsive.
Yeah.
And they're the only two survivors in their whole hometown.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, he finds Frannie while she is burying her parents, which is actually one of my favorite little snippets of the whole book, was the relationship that Frannie had with her folks. It's very interesting, very well written.
Sort of an overbearing mom. They're always kind of bickering at each other.
Yeah. Dad that's endlessly supportive but has high expectations, and very interesting commentary on relationships. And anyway, Harold finds Frannie burying her folks and basically convinces her to throw in with him, and I think they get on a motorbike or something. Maybe not yet. Maybe it's bicycles at first.
At first, they're driving the neighbor's car. I think he gets his neighbor's car.
Yeah.
It was this big, nice car that he always kind of liked, and so he just takes it.
But he can barely reach the pedals. He's 3.5 feet tall.
No, he's not.
Okay, that's how I envision him.
But then later they do get some motorcycles.
Right, yes.
Because the roads are all clogged with dead people in their cars.
Yep. Which is also an interesting component of this. You don't think about on this scale. Imagine the United States with 97% of its people gone, and all of these machines and all these things that we own just basically existing, but also dying in their existence. Vehicle batteries going dry. Is that what happens to a battery? Does it go dry?
Sure,
Does it die?
Go dead.
Yeah. Becomes an interesting thing for the survivors to try and move through the country with any sort of transportation, because
you can't just jump in a car and cruise along because the roads are clogged, and
right.
There's no trains running, there's no planes running, obviously, so it's very post-apocalyptic.
What was it about the animals too? Because if I had been there in the 80s, I'd be like, get me some horses, I'm going for a ride.
Actually, that's a great point.
I think that the horses died, but the deer didn't. And
there were it was a lot of domesticated animals were susceptible.
Dogs,
but most of the wild ones weren't.
Yeah.
And it never really explained why. It was just that's what happened.
Yeah.
Were the horses susceptible? I don't remember.
I think so, because the only time I remember anything about a farm animal was when they convene at the house of what shall we call her?
Who?
Mother Abagail.
Mother Abagail.
I guess we'll call her Mother Abagail.
One of the most interesting characters, I think.
Incredibly, yeah. And she lives out in the country, and at one point in time, they butcher some hogs, and they eat well for a minute. But
chickens and hogs were not susceptible.
Right.
They were still around, so they could eat on those for a while. Yeah.
And the deer were prolific. Elk, all the wildlife was still around. Wolves. Badgers.
Wolves come into play later.
Yeah.
Pretty cool stuff there.
And not a badger. What was it that attacked Mother Abagail?
It was a bunch of weasels.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're kind of straying into the territory of the big bad guy. His name's Randall Flagg. And he has some... This was where, when he was first introduced, I didn't really like the supernatural elements. He has some strange magical powers that he himself doesn't understand. He's discovering... with this whole virus thing happening, all of a sudden he's always been sort of a bad guy. He's been he's like a domestic terrorist, and then all of a sudden he's discovering he has magical powers, and part of the powers is there's scenes where he controls packs of wolves and sends them to attack people. There's scenes where he controls, and it's hundreds of weasels to go try to kill Mother Abagail. And so those are intense scenes. Those are cool parts.
The thing about the supernatural element is that it's sprinkled in early on,
yeah,
but it's not overbearing at all. it's almost shocking when it comes in, because everything else is so predictable in terms of like, not predictable, that's the wrong word.
Real world.
There's no shock to the conscience about like, you don't have to suspend disbelief early on in the book, because it's like, well, yeah, it's shocking of how, to consider how you would have to navigate a world in this post-apocalyptic context. But the magical powers, demonic powers that come out, that is sprinkled in early on. And then like you go through this whole...
I didn't like it at first, but then once you get used to it, it's like, oh, it's just another part of the story, and it's good. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah.
Where were we at?
I don't know.
Harold and Frannie.
Frannie and Harold are traveling. They meet Stuart Redman. Because he's escaped from that quarantine facility, the CDC facility.
He's escaped. And here's the other thing that needs to just be said now, because you're probably like, what the F are these guys talking about?
Yeah.
Mother Abagail represents good,
yeah,
righteous, whatever adjective you want to give it. And Randall Flagg is the dark side of the moon, or whatever. But they're in the same United States. Side note, I was wondering what's going on with the rest of the world at this time.
Yeah, I was always kind of wondering. Yeah, sorry.
There was some comment on that, but obviously, like, everything was shut down worldwide. I think that was assumed. And so little sects of people are gathering and creating their communities. But people start having dreams. Good people start having dreams about Mother Abagail, and they're frightening dreams, but they're compulsory dreams. They're demanding or compelling these people to go find this woman in, where was she?
Hemingford Home, Nebraska, which is a fictional town that actually shows up in a couple other Stephen King stories, so that's cool.
Yeah.
It's mentioned in a story called The Last Rung on the Ladder, which was part of that short story collection. And I think it's in Children of the Corn. I think. Could be wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I loved about the dreams was like, these people are having these haunting nightmares. They're very vivid, and they're all dreaming about the same thing. But how often do you wake up and tell other people about your dreams, especially if you just met them and you're traveling to get, so they don't know the other people are all having the same dream for a while.
Right.
It takes them a while to put the pieces together. I really liked that.
Yeah.
It was cool.
And there was a fair amount of restraint on behalf of these people who were otherwise very logical people, not wanting to say to others, like, I'm having these crazy dreams, and
I feel like Nebraska.
Yeah. So it takes some time for people to start to be open about that and go to Mother Abagail, who eventually tells them, this isn't where you're staying. You're going to Boulder, Colorado. Yeah,
that was pretty bizarre, I thought.
Yeah.
That she grew up in Hemingford. She's like 108 years old or something. Yeah. And she's like lived there all her whole life, but she just feels, nope, we got to go to Boulder.
Yeah.
And so she uproots her life with everyone who's gathered around her, and they travel to Colorado. I thought that was kind of, I kind of wondered from the author perspective, why did Stephen King choose to do that? Why didn't he just have them group up in Nebraska?
Yeah. Her story is really fascinating too. You get some good backstory on Mother Abagail of growing up in the antebellum South and being a black woman and all of the things she saw and experienced, and then losing family and losing property to ultimately end up being older than she wanted to be and still alive. She was totally self-sufficient at the point that people met her, which was like a saving grace for many of these folks who'd just been traveling, not knowing why they were and why they were going, where they were going, what they were going to find. But she had food, she had provision, she had a well, she had all these things. So it was in some ways like a mecca.
Yeah, very much so. Another character who joins them is maybe my favorite character in the book, Nick Andros. He's deaf.
And mute.
And mute, yeah. And we meet him, so we're kind of backing up back to the beginning. We kind of explain how they meet, and then we'll go on. We meet him, he's just sort of a vagrant, because he can't hold down a job. He's traveling, and some guys saw him in a bar, and for whatever reason, they didn't like the look of him. They saw him speaking sign language and they thought he was weird. I don't know. And they jump him after, and they beat the heck out of him. He gets beat up real bad. He one of his eyes almost loses an eye. loses an eye.
Loses his one.
Yeah. I think he gets a couple teeth knocked out. He got a broken rib. I can't remember. But he gets real beat up. And so he ends up staying in this town. He reports it to the sheriff, and these guys get arrested. But then the sheriff gets sick, and Nick Andros finds himself in custody of the people who nearly murdered him.
Yeah, he is deputized.
The sheriff deputizes him to help him take care of stuff.
Right.
Because everything's going to hell.
Yep.
And he finds himself alone in the jail with the guys who almost killed him, and they're in their cells, and he's like very nice. He's feeding them, but they're just like, let us out, let us out, let us out.
Yeah.
But he's afraid to let them out. But he kind of wants to let them out because he's like, I should just let them out so I can get out of here.
Well, he's feeding them for a time. This was another very real part of the experience, if it were to actually happen, where everything is shut down and most people are gone, is that the place he's getting food from to care for these prisoners, these people who attacked him, suddenly doesn't have any more food. And he has to make moves himself because...
I thought it was funny. He breaks into the restaurant, makes a few burgers, and like leaves money on the counter for the burgers and leaves.
Yeah, like in case...
Yeah, I thought, because nobody knows. That's one thing I was commenting to my wife. Everybody's getting the flu, going home, snuggling up in bed until they feel better, but then just dying. So a lot of people don't realize that like half the town is dead. Oh, 3/4 of the town. Oh, the whole town is dead. They don't know it until it's like over, basically.
Right.
And so, he doesn't know hardly anything that's going on because he's deaf, he's mute. He's just trying to take care of these guys in the prison. He knows that the sheriff is sick, and then I think a day or two later he finds out he died.
And then the sheriff's wife died, which was his other connection to the... And so he figures out, he reads in the paper something. It becomes known to him. Yeah,
eventually, of course, everybody figures it out. But it is a really interesting part to see them figure things out. Because, of course, the guys in the jail cells, they don't know what's going on. One of them is sick, and he's all covered in mucus, and he's just like, let me out of here. And then he eventually dies, and Nick is like, crap, should I let them out? What do I do? What do I do? I just loved the whole situation that he was put in.
So did he let them out? Because one of the things that... Actually. So I remember him...
I think he didn't he let the last guy out?
He let somebody out, but I don't think it was the last guy. This was confusing to me.
I
have to go back and read.
I think there were 3 guys that jumped him. 2 of them got arrested, and the other he got away. Yeah, he left town. He was sort of the ringleader, and he left town. The other 2 were in jail. One of them died in jail, and the other one in jail, I don't remember if he died or if he let him out, if Nick let him out.
Okay.
But then it was the ringleader that came back later, and they fought or something like that.
Okay, so there's another side story going on where there are these 3 dudes who are just ransacking things. They are criminal to the T.
2 dudes.
Was it only 2?
Poke and... Crap, what was his name?
I think it was 3.
Okay.
Anyway, here's where my confusion was. Were they put in a different jail somewhere else? Because the bad guy, Randall Flagg, eventually makes a pact with one of them to let him out of jail. Because he's... The dude's in jail.
He's a different location.
Okay. Anyway, it blended in my mind.
Yeah, that was really interesting too. This is why I say I think I'm a little messed up. Because all the most terrible things happening in the book, those were the parts I loved the most.
Yeah.
This guy, they're on this cross-country murder spree. They've just decided to go crazy. This is before the super flu even takes hold of the country. They're pulling up to gas stations, wasting everybody, stealing all the money and the Slim Jims, and jumping in the car and going to the next state.
And smoking copious amounts of pot on the way.
Yeah, they're getting, I think they were in Arizona. It was Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado. They were around there, I think.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. So the one guy gets killed by a good guy with a gun, and then the other one, he goes to jail, and that's where the big bad Randall Flagg finds him, almost starving to death.
Yeah, he's ready to eat the other.
He's nibbling on the other inmate's leg.
Yeah.
He's pulled him through the bars, and he's got a few bite marks out of his leg. That was crazy.
And Randall Flagg basically says, "I'll free you, but you're mine."
Yeah.
Right?
You'll serve me, you'll be my right-hand man, but I'll give you food. You'll get out of here and you'll survive.
And he does.
Yeah.
During this same time.
Was Leonard. Was it Leonard?
That could be right.
It started with an L. I'm almost sure of that. Anyway.
During this time, there's another character who is perpetually alone by choice, who is affectionately called Trash Can Man.
Trash Can Man. Ooh.
He's wandering,
I don't know if
blistering. Well, okay, it's affection. Okay, I imputed that. But he's wandering through the desert, blistering in the heat, and he is having a dream too. But it's the opposite dream. It's where we get a glimpse into the dreams that some of the bad people are having, that they're being compelled to go to Nevada, right?
Las Vegas, Nevada, yeah.
And that's where Randall Flagg has set up shop. He has taken over Vegas, which is not surprising.
Sin City.
Yeah. Trash Can Man independently decides that his only will to live, because he's like in rough shape. This man is just, the way he's described, his flesh is falling off of him, and he's blistering, he's hungry, and he just loves blowing shit up.
He's a complete pyromaniac.
Complete, beyond. A pyromaniac that has no control over it. Like,
yeah, that's how he got his nickname, because he like blew up some trash cans or something like that.
Set trash can fires and stuff.
When he was a kid, so the other kids started calling him Trash Can Man.
He just loves the flame and the fire and the dark side, and he's having dreams about Randall Flagg, and so he becomes compelled to find Randall Flagg.
And I don't think it's ever outright stated, but I felt like he's not really all there, right? Trash Can Man?
No, he's for sure not there.
Yeah, right?
He seems like he's done too many drugs, and he's like...
You kind of get that vibe, something along those lines. Like that kind of person that's just like, you're pretty wild, man. You're pretty out there. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and he just lives to set fires.
Yep.
But he has an almost supernatural ability to find explosives and flammable things, which comes into play at the very end of the book.
Yeah.
But what I liked about Trash Can Man is, you see him coming out of the desert to Las Vegas, and he's all burned up, and he's exhausted, he's dehydrated. But then you get a bunch of flashbacks about how he traveled from the Midwest, blowing stuff up along the way.
Yeah.
And that's part of why he's not just sunburned. He's like singed from all these fires he's been setting.
Yeah.
And he's almost dead. And along the way, he meets a guy named The Kid, which we didn't even mention how The Stand was originally published. Stephen King had to cut a lot out of the book, and then in 1990, I think it was, he added it all back in. And The Kid is one of the characters that was completely cut out of the first printing. Mm-hmm. He meets this guy named The Kid, who's another total psychopath, who's on his way to Vegas. But The Kid thinks he's going to show up in Vegas, kill Randall Flagg, and take control. And he's just delusional, and he gets eaten by wolves along the way, because Randall Flagg targets him. Yeah.
He has some control over certain
animals,
Yeah. The writing, Stephen King's writing of his dialogue in particular was really good to read. It was I thought, his affect came through.
Yeah. You could read, different characters, and without knowing who they were, you would pick up on who they were.
Yeah.
By the way they would talk. Yeah.
Right.
Stephen King's really good at that.
Can we pause?
Yeah.
Because
pause the video.
Yeah.
1 hour later.
We're going to the dog park. We paused the video, and then Mo was like, "Let's go to the dog park." He doesn't even have a dog. It's gonna be fun.
2 hours later. 3 hours later.
A wonderful throw, sir.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting, and they had to hire a new one.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and we got a timer going because we got to finish this video before we go to dinner.
Chinese food tonight, Golden Star on Orchard. If you haven't been, you should go. We are not sponsored by Golden Star, but if we were, the Moo Goo Gai Pan is what's on the menu tonight.
What is it? Okay, 30-second detour.
Yeah. You think
what is it about Golden Star that you've been talking about Golden Star for the last 15 years?
When I was in my mother's womb, she was ingesting the MSG at Golden Star, and it got to me. And I would be a very different individual today if I hadn't had in vitro MSG.
All right, 30 seconds are up.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you took me there when we were in high school.
That is, man.
He's obsessed with it. Anyway.
So we were talking about Trash Can Man, and we have to go back to Trash Can Man because unsuspecting hero, this man.
Should we go ahead and just spoil the ending, just say what happens?
If you want to.
We did mention he has a great propensity for finding explosives and other flammable objects.
And well, so you got to understand, one other component to the entire United States shutting down is that most of the military is gone. There are undefended military bases. There are weapons available if you can find them. And Trash Can Man, in addition to setting trash can fires, he has a propensity for digging through things and just finding things like a person who lives in a trash can might.
I never made that connection. That's nice.
I just decided that was a connection.
He's Oscar the Grouch.
Because he finds an atom bomb.
He finds a nuclear bomb. Or nuclear. We were talking about George Bush earlier. How did he say it? Nuclear? Nuclear. The word is nuclear, but he always pronounced it nuclear.
Nuclear bomb. Rarely is the question asked, where are we keeping our nuclear bombs?
I remember when Obama was elected, one of the funniest jokes I saw on Saturday Night Live, they were like, it's official, and they showed Barack Obama. It will now, for the next 4 years at least, it will be pronounced nuclear.
Yes, Trash Can Man, I think pronounced it correct. I don't think he knew what he had. Well,
yeah, he just brought it into town. Oh yeah, and everybody was like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, he didn't just bring it into town. But before we get to how Trash Can Trash Can Ma'am.
It is ma'am.
Before we get to how he inadvertently saves the good from the evil with a nuclear bomb. Nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
You got to understand that at some point, the good side, who are based in Boulder, Colorado, have decided that they can't just lay in wait. They've been fearful. They all know about the Dark Man because they're having bad dreams about the Dark Man.
Right. They've learned to trust those dreams. And so they know Randall Flagg is on the other side of the Rocky Mountains. Yep. And he's up to no good.
So they got to put an end to it. And rather than, they decide, they have a committee. And rather than just laying in wait, sitting ducks, they're going to go and they're going to confront him.
Well, do you remember why they decide that, though? I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted to get your take on this because you're familiar with law and stuff. It's not exactly one-to-one comparison.
I'm a wizard of laws, yes.
Yeah, but there's this whole sort of middle section of the book that a lot of people apparently find a little bit on the boring side, where they're trying to reform society.
Yes.
And there's all these committee meetings, and what are we going to do about all the dead bodies, and what are we going to do to get the power back up, and this and that.
I loved all that. But
you loved it? Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of get your take on that.
Well, it's because it's real. Like, how would you restart? You got things you have to do. What do you do how do you divide and conquer? And what the good side did well, I'm not meaning to hijack what you're saying, but what the good side did well is they recognized the values that people had that they could bring to the community, and they start delegating tasks. How do we get electricity back up and running? Who has that power? And so they rebuild their own society.
It's not particularly exciting, but it is, like you said, it's very real world, it's very understandable, and it's like, how would you do this?
Yeah, the question had to be answered.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So they have this committee, but they have a really interesting social setup where they have a committee that, decides all this stuff, but they also take into account what Mother Abagail says. And she refuses to be on the committee. But they're like, they basically give her the power to veto anything. And they're just like, we all gathered around you, so whatever you say is probably more or less what we're going to end up doing. And it was her that she went out in the wilderness.
She went missing for a long time.
She disappeared. Yeah. Because I thought it was really interesting from a religious perspective. There's actually, sorry, I'm like all over the place. I was very surprised at how much religious language and imagery and stuff is in this book.
Like an undertone?
Yeah, and Mother Abagail, she's really portrayed as like a prophet. Mm-hmm. And there's this whole part where she talks about, I haven't been perfect enough, I haven't been worthy enough to really lead you guys, so I need to go off in the wilderness and sort of like repent and find myself again. And everybody in town is like, you're 108 years old, don't leave!
The atmosphere is crushing you into a diamond. You can't go out there.
And everybody just is like, well, she's dead. You know? And only a few people hold on to hope. And she does come back, and she tells him,
go.
She chooses 4 or 5 of the main character guys and tells them, you have to go to Las Vegas, you have to go make a stand and defeat the enemy, but you have to go alone. And it's like 4 or 5 guys. Like, what? Yeah. I think it's 4. I can't remember.
And I don't remember if she chose each of them specifically or if she said this has to happen, and they said we'll go. And Stuart Redman was one of them. Stuart,
and then there's he's sort of a philosopher. He was a professor, and not Glenn Bateman was his name.
Wasn't he a judge?
No, that's another guy.
Also a judge.
The judge.
Yeah. Okay. Sensible.
And then who was the other one that went? Oh, it was Larry. We haven't even talked about Larry.
We haven't talked about Larry Underwood, but
he's an interesting character. Although I never found him that compelling. A lot of people say he's like their favorite character. I was like,
he's
okay.
He's relatable in certain ways, but not my favorite character.
I did really like his setup, where he's an aspiring musician and he just had a big hit and it's playing on the radio all over the country.
Baby, can you dig your man?
And then the whole country dies.
Yeah.
He's like, I finally arrived, and then never mind.
Well, it's interesting because the lyrics of the song and it appears as almost like an epilogue to many chapters in the book. It's
interspersed throughout the book. Yeah.
Baby, can you dig your man? He's a righteous man. Like even that goes back to the undertone of religion. And Larry, was not a nice guy, as his mother said. You're not a nice guy. He took advantage of people. He was self-serving, selfish.
He was trying to make it in the music bit. He was trying to claw his way to the top.
Yeah. But ultimately, he takes the call to duty from Mother Abagail. He goes to make the stand with these guys. Along the way, Stu falls into this cavernous... it's like where the road has been washed out.
Yeah, it's like a steep embankment, and they're trying to climb down. He falls.
Breaks his leg. And tells him, go without me. Everyone's sure. I mean, you're sure as a reader he's going to die. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't.
Yeah, that was a wild part where he's like, well, go without me. And they're like, well, we can't. And he's like, well, you have to.
And it was really Larry who was like, we're not leaving you.
Yeah.
Right?
And you think, he's laying in the bottom, and it's cold. It's wintertime.
Yeah.
And
what was
the
the
whole
dog's
thing,
name? Because the dog... Kojak. Yeah.
There was like one dog that they found that had survived. It was immune. His name Kojak. Belonged to Glenn, this old professor guy.
Spoiler alert, Stu does survive because of Kojak, which is, as a dog owner, I don't know if you'll see clips of, we just took a trip to the dog park. I don't know if that's going to factor in here.
I'll put it in there. Yeah, that's
but I loved that part, that like Kojak, anyway.
He keeps him warm. He brings him doesn't he bring him food?
Yeah,
like
he goes out and catches rabbits. Brings him rabbits. He was able to smoke some cigarettes and start a fire and eventually be found. But here's, how much time do we have? We have to get to this
15 minutes, 16-minute mark.
I got to say one thing before we get to the big hoorah.
Okay.
Our little snively, what did you call him?
The incel?
Incel.
Harold.
Our Harold, the incel. He's conflicted. From the beginning, conflicted. Yeah. He goes to the good side with Frannie, but when Frannie leaves him, she doesn't really leave him.
So he was under the impression that he was going to get a chance with her or whatever.
Yeah.
When they first met Stuart recognized, this dude is super into her, and he's not going to accept me until I put him at ease. So Stuart tells Harold, I have no interest in Frannie, don't worry.
Right.
So
which was a lie.
Harold lets him in. Well, it wasn't a lie at the time, but then it's like immediately afterward, he starts to fall in love with Frannie.
Yeah, he's a man, and so we know how that goes. Like, Frannie's a young, beautiful woman.
So Harold is irrational. He feels very betrayed.
Yeah.
And he starts making plans for revenge.
Right. And this is an interesting part. When they end up in Boulder, they're initially 1,000 people or 2,000 people. The numbers grow, more people arrive, and they are put to task and found homes, made part of the community. You see all of that in the boring part of the book. But it's interesting to think of a metropolis area that has all of these empty homes, and people just decide where they want to live. And Harold decides he's going to live far away from everybody on the outskirts of town, and he's going to keep his curtains closed.
You were going to say shutters, and you changed the curtains.
Yes, I did.
His curtains.
Yeah, his curtains were closed, and he was plotting something awful. In fact, he kills some people with a bomb when they were having a meeting. Town.
Yeah, they're in the middle of a meeting. He tries to blow up the committee that's reorganizing.
And he killed Nick.
He kills my favorite character, Nick Andros, the deaf and mute guy. He kills him. That was sad.
That was really sad, actually.
I was like, no, he's not dead.
Yeah, I almost threw the book in the fireplace. I was like, this is...
Like, in a book where literally millions of people have died, I didn't want to believe that Nick had just died.
No, he couldn't die. It was really strange, though. Harold becomes in a relationship with another conflicted member of the community who is this celibate woman.
Nadine Cross.
Nadine, who comes to the community with a child that actually rejects her, ultimately.
Not her child, like a kid that she picked up along the way. Yeah.
Right. Well, a kid that she was teaching at a school. She knew the kid.
Was she his teacher?
I thought so, yeah.
You may be right, because she was a former teacher.
Right.
An elementary school teacher.
I'm pretty sure that's the case, but the kid ends up rejecting her because the kid loves Mother Abagail and gleans onto, Larry gleans to the good. And she's conflicted. She's actually kind of like a sex-obsessed woman who...
It's weird.
It's weird. Suffice to say, it's weird, but Harold and Nadine kind of join forces for a limited time until Nadine thinks better of his plans, but it's too late. He's already blown up some people. He's killed Nick, and I just wanted to put a bookend on Harold.
What I wanted to talk about Harold. I really loved how you think about a teenage boy who's never had anyone interested in him romantically. How would you control him? How would you get him to do what you want? I thought it was kind of brilliant. So the thing with Nadine is she's been having weird visions that she's sort of like, it's hard to explain. I tried to talk about it with my wife, and it just sounds weird. Like, it just sounds so creepy and weird when you try to say it, but it makes sense in the book. That she's saving herself sexually for Randall Flagg, the big bad guy.
Right, yeah.
And she somehow intuits or knows that if she has sex with anybody else before, then he won't want her anymore.
Yep.
He'll reject her, and like, it's almost like that's her whole purpose in life, to save herself for him. And so they kind of join forces, but the way to control Harold is give him sex with a hot girl. And Nadine is...
Anal sex.
Because
it can't be the real thing.
Yeah, Nadine is pretty foxy. Larry had a thing for her, and they almost... Like, it was like this really interesting where, like, if she says yes to him, that it's sort of her redemption, and she's going to fully go to the good side, but then... Just at that moment, Larry kind of turns her away, and she turns... And it's like, this doesn't quite match up, and you're just, like, yelling at the book, like, you need to get together to save the world. I don't know.
No, I remember feeling that, too.
But I thought it was brilliant how Nadine just flat out tells Harold, I'll do anything you want except for vaginal intercourse. Anything you want. But we got to go do that. And Harold falls for it. Hardcore. Yeah. Just like... He's got a little sex slave at the house,
but it only satiates him for so long.
She's got him wrapped around her finger.
He becomes bored with her.
Does he?
Yeah, there are some really heated issues between them.
Well, yeah, he doesn't like her, really.
Yeah, he really wants Frannie, but
but he also hates Frannie. He wants to kill her also. Yeah. Well, he mostly wants to kill Stuart.
Right.
Anyway,
he's
just read the book, you guys.
In the last minutes, a stand is made. Right. These men go to Vegas, and they're stopped about 80 miles outside of town. I don't know, maybe less.
I think it was maybe farther than that, because it took them hours to drive into town.
Yeah, they had to drive a long ways. Yeah. They're stopped by some of the bad guys, and they're driven back to Vegas, where they are immediately imprisoned. And to cut to the chase...
Yeah, so they're imprisoned in Las Vegas, and they're set to be executed. Something that's been going on in Vegas is Randall Flagg. I thought this was a really interesting component. You would think it's Mordor, basically. You know, it's evil. There's going to be all sorts of sin and wanton criminality. Randall Flagg runs a tight ship. Anybody caught with drugs is executed. Mm-hmm. Anybody who does this or that is publicly not even just executed. They crucify them on telephone poles in the public square, so everybody knows you follow the frickin' rules here. You know. I thought that was really wild. I expected it to be this sort of rampant orgy of just do whatever you want.
Right.
But he was like, nope.
No, he had control.
So anyway, they're set to be crucified, I think, right?
Yeah. Also, little side note, so Nadine does eventually make it to Randall, and she commits suicide.
That was wild.
There's some crazy stuff in there. She basically tries to throw herself out a window, and then it doesn't work, so she throws her neck into a shard of glass and kills herself. But and that kind of throws him a little bit, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, because this was like his little princess that he'd been sort of grooming with these weird visions from afar. And it was supposed to be like this culmination of like, if he could team up with her, then he would have all the power. I don't know. Like,
there's something there. It seems to shake him, which makes sense because he has to be a little bit shaken by the time the stand is made. So he has a plan for these men who are captured. The plan goes pretty much according to plan, except that one of the captured good guys gets killed on the spot in prison. There's an exchange.
Was that Glenn?
I thought it was the judge.
No, the judge wasn't. The judge is the guy that tried to infiltrate as a spy by himself. Remember, he was like driving through northern Idaho. Remember that?
That's right. There were a couple of people who infiltrated.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
That's something we haven't even mentioned. There were a few people that were sent early to be spies.
Yeah.
And anyway.
If you're still watching this, okay, we're going to finish this because we have to.
We're going to dinner.
3 men are ultimately put in a cage, a single cage.
I think it was like a cage on the back of a truck,
And they're going to be executed by the bad guy, by Randall Flagg. And what happens, I'm going to let you tell the final
so
bit.
It's like the moment. And of course, as the reader, you're like, what is going to happen? And then Trash Can Man shows up with a nuclear bomb. And everyone's like, oh, crap, what are you doing here? You shouldn't.
Okay,
what are you doing?
Hold on. I'm not going to let you tell. Because you're missing an important part.
I'm sorry. I failed you.
No, this was an important part. The 3 men from the good side are in a cage, and they are surrounded by all of the bad people, the community, who at this point, the tide is starting to turn. These people are starting to wonder what they're a part of. There's been this military law put forward, and so the men making the stand attempt as a last-ditch effort to make an appeal to these people. And they basically say, this is wrong, and you know it's wrong.
Make a little speech.
You realize that there's no point in murdering us in front of you or for anybody being murdered. This guy's demented. Randall Flagg is demented. And so they make this appeal, and a couple people are buying in. The crowd starts to change a little bit by the time that the execution's supposed to happen.
I think I completely forgot about that part. I have a bad habit of rushing through the end because I'm like, oh, I'm almost there, and then I can't remember the ending.
Okay, well, I think it's important
happens to me a lot.
Because in order to regain control, this is really significant, I think. In order to regain control, Randall Flagg creates this orb of energy. Do you remember this?
He does it?
Yes. That was my understanding. He creates this orb of energy that's floating above the people, and they all fall silent because it's
like, whoa, he's doing magic.
Yeah, he's doing magic. And he also had just like basically suffocated a person and like made them turn inside out because they came forward and they were like,
oh, they started criticizing. They started.
And he's like, talk back to me, see what happens. And so in order to shut everyone up, he creates this ball of energy. And it was my understanding that when Trash Can Man comes from the military base in a tractor type trailer unit with a nuclear bomb on the back, it was the collision of those two things that set off the nuclear bomb.
This energy sort of, it touched the bomb and Las Vegas is nuked.
And the 3 men who made the stand are also nuked.
Yeah, everyone dies.
Stuart Redman, who's in a ditch far away.
A few hundred miles away. He's the only survivor.
Right.
Yeah. And then we mentioned there were some spies. So there was one guy that got sent. He's mentally disabled. He's I like that character. It was Tom.
Oh, yeah, Tom Cullen.
Tom Cullen.
Love Tom.
He had been sent as a spy earlier, and he was on his way back to Boulder.
He was also a hypnotized spy, which was
they hypnotized
fascinating.
him so he wouldn't give himself away. That was pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So he misses the bomb, and he meets up with Stuart on his way out of town. He helps Stuart get back to Boulder, and they both survive. And Frannie has her baby. Kojak, yeah.
Yep.
Frannie has her baby. The baby was immune, right? At the end? Or was that sort of ambiguous?
That was a question mark. So where it ends, as I recall, was that people get back, the good community is going to continue to be a good community. But people start factioning off. I'm losing my words now.
You need Chinese food.
I'm getting hungry. I'm looking at the clock. 3 minutes and we roll. Stu and Frannie decide they're going to take off and they're going to go do what they can.
They're going to move back to Maine.
They're going back to Maine.
And the town of Castle Rock is briefly mentioned. She's like, I want to go see whatever, and Castle Rock.
Yep.
And which is a town that a lot of other stories, Stephen King stories, take place in.
Yeah, and they actually, if I recall correctly, they go back the way that they came. They went to Mother Abigail's house one more time, and then they started heading north. And the question mark is the baby going to survive or is it going to die?
Yeah.
So
wow, that's The Stand.
That's The Stand.
I
hope that you understand what we just...
It might be hard to follow what we've just talked about.
Yeah. Also, I realized we did a terrible job, or at least I did, of making any eye contact with you. I'm supposed to be thinking
is it eye contact? Lens contact?
Lens contact with an audience. I'm pretty much just chilling with my bro and enjoying...
I was just getting lost in your eyes.
Same. Yeah.
I wanted to we have like a minute or two.
Yeah.
Let's do a rapid fire. One question I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
If you had to boil it down, why should someone read The Stand?
I don't know that anyone should read The Stand. I can't imagine giving the book to somebody and saying, you should read this. But I think that anyone could enjoy reading The Stand who has survived COVID. Especially, I mean, we all went through 2 years roughly of a lockdown, and it changed us fundamentally as a society, as people. Like, you've got quirkiness that you are yet to understand fully. We both do, because of the isolation and that whole experience.
I noticed myself that I really liked the first half. Oh, the timer's going off. We'll finish with this, I guess. I love the first half. The whole world descending into chaos, virus, people start to kill each other because they're panicking and everything's just going awful. I love that. And then after everything was sort of calmed down and they start gathering, I found it to be not as enjoyable, but it was still good. But like, the whole thing is, I think, worth reading. But yeah, just my favorite part probably is when the military just starts shooting anybody who steps out of quarantine. And it was just scary. And we've seen things not quite that bad, but like in Australia and China, there's some pretty crazy stuff going on where the government is really, trying to control things, or was, or whatever, I don't know. And so it was scary to read that. It's like, whoa, like they just start blasting people. Like, you step out of your house, you're gone.
Anyway, yeah. It's Stephen King.
It's good. It's a good story. And should we stop the video? I was gonna. Well, there was one other thing.
I'm stopping it. I need Chinese food.
I was just gonna say if we didn't even touch on like half the stuff in the book. That's the thing. We've talked for so long, and we're trying not to be so over the top, taking forever, but of course we are. But like, if you want to read the book, buckle your seatbelt, because there's so much in there that we didn't even get to mention. There's whole character arcs, entire plot lines that like we just glossed over or didn't mention at all.
To the first person who writes in the comments, buckle your seatbelt, because I don't know how many people have made it this far. If you write, buckle your seatbelt.
That shows that you've watched the whole video. Yeah.
I will send you a gift. It will not be what we said earlier.
It won't be a drink.
No, maybe socks.
Send them socks, some Christmas socks. I did not like Frannie Goldsmith.
Oh, I loved Frannie.
And I'm going to end the video on that note.
Frannie was great.
Paula Poundstone.
Don't say it on...
I'll cut that out.
This reminds me of when I got my mission call. I called my mom and I said, do you want to guess where I'm going? And she's like, yeah, I think she said, you're going to China. And I said, no. She said, you're going to Argentina. I said, no. She said, well, you're going to the Middle East. And I said, no. Do you want me just to tell you? She said, yeah, tell me. I said, I'm going to Russia. She's like, well, that's in the Middle East. Yeah. This will be cut out, but I feel you in that because... Because
your real name is not Mo.
Yeah, it's Dylan. Name. And I just decided after going through all of the school, I was not that guy in school who told the professor, like, even though that says Dylan, call me Mo. I didn't want to be that guy, but I figured professionally I could just decide what I wanted and what was most comfortable. So, but I'm never offended if someone calls me Dylan.
Yeah, I'm not either. Although if I tell someone I go by Ty and they keep calling me Luke, I feel it's almost like an internal thing. Like, okay, I understand you're not interested in being my friend. Like, I kind of feel that.
Does your mom call you Luke?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's not interested in being my friend.
Yeah, mine either. Which is why I threw my mom under the bus with the geography.
No, everybody here still calls me Luke.
Okay.
But when I moved to Texas, that was my moment to like seize the reins.
Yeah.
Speaking of my mom, she's calling me.
Oh, Cheryl. Does she go by Cheryl or Ty?
Yeah, Cheryl. Hello. Hey, what's up? No, I'm with Dylan. I'm with Mo. She knows you as Dylan.
Eventually.
Okay, I'll see you later.
Tell her I love her.
Mo says he loves you.
I heard it. That made me so happy.
You just validated his entire existence.
Yes.
See ya.
Okay, so
I think Sided finally texted me back.
I have a request because you're going to cut out the phone call and probably
that is something
like
I actually will
10
cut.
minutes of this
Probably. Yeah.
If you do a cut, will you do one of the SpongeBob SquarePants that's like 2 hours later?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay,
I tried to do that on my old... I used to record and edit with just the program that came with the computer, and it was awful. And then I discovered a website called Canva, and that's where I edit now, and I can actually add things in, and I can actually like do stuff.
Just to be clear, Canva is not a sponsor of this
video. Not a paid sponsor.
Yeah, we're actually sponsored by Aflac, and we'll get to that later, but that's how we're making as much money as we are, even though only 4 people view.
That's how Mo got to quit his day job, and yeah.